Welcome to the TechLink Health Podcast, an on-demand source for the top trending healthcare topics and insights. Delivered by key opinion and emerging leaders and as featured on the TechLink Health app. The healthcare industry is rapidly evolving, so our goal is to connect listeners to the most relevant insights, ranging from digital health to financial well-being to interesting side gigs. For more details, visit www.techlink.health.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the TechLink Health Podcast. I'm Dr. Sarah Saman, and I'll be hosting this episode. Throughout history, cyclical disruptions have often played a role in evolving people and the ways in which we engage with work. The current pandemic has definitely been a notable disruption that has also been a catalyst for change, particularly with regards to the ways in which people work. The strains on the healthcare system have been well noted, and burnout is on the rise as many seek to find new ways to stay engaged with professional activities. It's always refreshing to get diverse perspectives on how we define work. During this episode, we discuss the topic of healthcare practitioners being able to engage in both clinical and non-clinical activities as a way to stay refreshed professionally. This episode's guest is Dr. Naomi Lawrence Reed, a pediatrician and founder and CEO of Doctoring Differently, a company focused on teaching physicians step by step how to pivot from traditional full-time practice into a variety of clinical and non-clinical opportunities. The Doctoring Differently platform emphasizes career autonomy in salary, schedule, and variety of practice. Dr. Naomi has a Bachelor of Science from Wake Forest University and a Doctor of Medicine from the University of Massachusetts Medical School. It goes without saying that Dr. Naomi has a unique approach and perspective focused on helping others realize alternative career paths, and we look forward to hearing her perspectives. So without further delay, we're excited to welcome Dr. Naomi to the podcast. Dr. Naomi, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Great to be here.
So let's start with a few questions to learn more about you. And to give our listeners some background, can you take a moment to introduce yourself in a bit more detail and tell us about your journey into helping others take advantage of non-traditional careers?
Absolutely. I love this journey and path that I'm on, and I enjoy talking about it. I, as you stated, am a pediatrician. I finished my training in New York City, my general pediatrics residency at Einstein in the Bronx in 2014. And I actually really enjoyed residency. It's a big children's hospital. I enjoyed working with my co-residents and colleagues. And I initially envisioned a career in pediatric emergency medicine. I moved to Southern California, San Diego. In 2014, after finishing residency, I worked in a pediatric emergency department. And I initially thought fellowship was going to be my path. Turned out not, but I continued to work in that setting for almost 3 years. And around a year and a half to 2 years in, I looked around and I knew personally I was very unhappy. I looked around, many of my colleagues were unhappy. We felt overworked. We felt like we had no autonomy or control over the trajectory of our careers, over our schedule, over our salary that we could request or demand. And in those moments, it felt like, okay, I've worked this hard for a career that so far I'm not happy with at all. And especially working in an emergency room, I was working with physicians who were 20 and 30 years older than me, right next to me, and watching them and hearing them count down the seconds and minutes to retirement. I knew I didn't want that to be my life and my career. And I owed more to myself, to my family, to everyone who had supported me in my medical journey. And so around the summer of 2017, I left that job and I didn't have a great plan for my future. I didn't know. People looked at me like I was crazy. They said, well, this is the best you'll have. And in fact, that is actually what my boss said to me. This is the best job you'll ever have. And there's nothing out there. This is all there is. And I just couldn't believe that to be true. So I left that job. I took a couple months off, which also I had a lot of look from people saying, who do you think you are taking months off from work? I said, I'm tired. I've been working a long time. I deserve a few months. I ended up going per diem at another hospital in San Diego in my community, and starting to go per diem just allowed me to rest, to look around, to pick the shifts I wanted, to just have a break, to feel like my adrenaline was coming down. And we'll get into it, but that was just the first step in feeling like I had control over my life and my future and my career. I began to explore different types of medicine as a result. Initially thinking, okay, well, maybe I thought it was just primary care that pediatricians could do, but it turns out there's so much more. And over 5 years at this point, I have started different types of physician work that's flexible, that's lucrative, that I'm able to negotiate my salary and my schedule. This past summer, I took 2 months off and traveled throughout Europe. I'd never done that. I was never able to do that. I didn't think that'd be possible for a pediatrician to do, but it is when you can completely control your schedule and have freedom over your life. And so in 2020, I looked up halfway through the pandemic and saw that my colleagues and friends and classmates I'd trained with were so unhappy in full-time clinical medicine and felt unprotected and felt like, is this it? I thought I thought the system would be protecting me, and I don't feel that way. And I realized they simply did not know about their options. They are not taught to us in training. We're actively discouraged from exploring alternative opportunities often. And in that moment, I knew that physicians, one thing we're good at is school and learning. And if I could create a course, that would probably be the best way to deliver all of the information that I had learned in a palatable and digestible way.
That's quite a journey. And it really strikes me that you had this revelation early on in your career and you took steps to move forward. And that obviously took a lot of bravery. And I hear you when you tell us about the skepticism and negativity from the more senior physicians and even from your classmates. You're really taking a leap of faith to make the types of changes that you made. But obviously, that has worked out well for you. And that didn't just happen. You had to learn and work through and discover what the options are and create opportunities for yourself. So, in the process of doing this, from everything I've seen on your website and everything I'm hearing, you've created a pathway for other people to find their own path through medicine and find what works for them. So, tell us more about your course because that is something that is not traditional. It's not something that's taught to physicians, as you say. People aren't aware that there's other opportunities. So this is something that's unique. And I'd like to hear more about the course and the methodology that you've created that can help other physicians find their own way.
Sure. So I've modeled the course almost identically after my own experience that has worked out tremendously well. And I wanted to create the roadmap in the class that I wish I had because I didn't have it. So the course starts in the first week. It's a 6-week course. Right now I teach it live, but into the new year, I intend to record it and make it entirely automated for physicians to have on-demand access. But as it presently stands, and it will be very similar, I start with actually a lot of tangible intangibles. I tell physicians, I start off by saying, listen, there are no rules to this physician career. We have to get our head right. We have to get our attitude and our mind right about wanting and needing and knowing that we deserve to make transitions in our lives. And we don't have to accept things the way they are, the way they've been handed to us. And I say over and over again, I start with, there are no rules to doctoring. We are told there are rules. It's full-time, it's part-time, it's academic or it's private practice, and that's it. And if you're private practice, you're selling out. And if you're not full-time, you're not a team player. And these things that have driven physicians to burnout, to depression, time and time and time again. And I don't see any way out in that current way that we're taught and trained. So in those first sessions, I say there are no rules. You're allowed to make your decisions. You're allowed to explore new things. You have permission. I like to say physicians don't need permission, but we need permission. We need someone to say, it's okay. You can do it. We need someone to at least give us the green light and say, like a pat on the back and just saying, it's okay. I understand. I went through it too, and you can do it. The feelings of self-doubt and physicians feeling like, well, if XYZ university didn't teach it to me or school of medicine didn't teach it to me, then I must not be able to know it or I shouldn't know it. And then at that point, I also start talking about next best steps, that all it takes, we've been on this path. Many of us since high school, since college, we just said physician, and it looks like a 5-lane highway stretching straight out into the horizon. And there doesn't need to be much deviation. We don't need to be hacking our way through a jungle, finding our own path. It's already laid out for us. But to start to think about doctoring differently and creating your own career, your own tailor-made career that works for you, there will be some exploration and there'll be a little bit of creativity there. But all it takes is a next best step. It's hard to get off of the 5, 10, 20-year plan for our careers and just think, okay, what can I do next? For me, it was leaving my job in the pediatric ER and going per diem. I would have had no idea that 5 years later, I'd be doing everything that I'm doing and going everywhere that I'm going and teaching and learning and picking up different things and talking to doctors around the world. I would have never thought that. I just did not like my job and I wanted to be happy. So I went per diem. And in one thing, one step after another led me here. So I get through all of that in the first step, in the first week. I then talk about our clinical opportunities. So clinical medicine is what we know. And for me, that was my next best step too. I was still a pediatrician. I just went per diem. I talk about going per diem, doing locums or travel work, telemedicine. I talk about prescribing Suboxone or medically assisted treatments, which we can do remotely with the DEAX waiver. In week 3, I start talking about non-clinical opportunities like medical expert witness work and working in pharmaceuticals, veteran disability work. I talk about functional and integrative medicine, jobs for physicians in tech and in media and in journalism. I explore all kinds of things, aesthetics. I talk about starting a Botox or filler practice, or at least considering a lot of physicians are approached by advanced practice providers, nurse practitioners, or PAs about being medical directors for their own practices. I explore that. In week 4, I start talking about the money and business of doctoring differently, getting your own malpractice insurance. And I remind physicians, listen, this is something we should be taught. And there's a reason we're not taught that. How are we not taught about our own liability? We can be sued the day we start residency, yet we are never taught our liability, how we're protected, how we're vulnerable from litigation. We're never taught that. And I think that we're scared of what we don't know and think if we step out, we'll be sued immediately and we'll lose our livelihoods. I teach malpractice. I think every physician should learn that in medical school. How are we not? Again, how are we not? I teach how to get our own health insurance, how to manage and handle your own retirement benefits, those things that keep good physicians in bad jobs every day. We think we can't learn those things. We think we're not supposed to know them when millions of Americans navigate those worlds every single day, getting their own insurance and getting their own benefits. We can do it too. In week 5, I talk about resignation, how to resign from a job, hopefully without burning bridges. But I also say that sometimes that might not be possible, but either way, you're able to resign. This is how to have the conversation. This is how to write the letter. This is how to bridge the gap to your next opportunity, whatever it is. And in the last week, we wrap it up, we tie it up, we talk about all the things you can learn, you can know. And quite frankly, that once again, that we deserve to be happy and we have permission to explore and try new things.
I think that's wonderful. These are such practical and actionable skills. And they're the things, as you say, that keep physicians up at night. We just assume we don't know how to manage malpractice or how we're going to get insurance or even what it might cost. How are we going to tell our colleagues? What other options might we have? These are the things that just kind of stop people in their tracks and, as you say, keep them on that straight and narrow road that we've been designed to follow. So I think the course that you've designed sounds like a course that's going to answer the questions that are holding people back. I'm curious, who are your students? What type of people find you? Are they people that are early in their professional life? Are they later? What's the mix of physicians?
At this point, my first cohort was August of 2021. That's a great story about my first student. I can get to that next. That was my first cohort. Since then, I've done 7 sessions in a little over a year. And I have had a broad range. I have had early to nearing retirement take this class. I've had family medicine, pediatrics, internal medicine, critical care. This course could apply to any physician of any specialty, quite frankly. All of the things I've described, because I realize people look at me and think, you're a pediatrician, you're not my specialty. How could you know what I can do? I can tell you how to find it. And so many of the things, the locums, per diem, medical expert witness, those are things that apply to any physician. Any physician of any specialty can participate in. Media, tech, everything I teach, if you're a physician with an unrestricted U.S. medical license, preferably board certified in any specialty, everything I teach is available.
That's amazing. I feel like we're at such a juncture in healthcare and as physicians, looking back when I graduated in 1988, there was no such thing as an employed physician. And now 75% of doctors are employed. And I'm sure those numbers are going up every day. And so we've lost that autonomy that kind of defined us as people as we came through our educational process. So, such a need for this information. So, let's talk a bit about technology since that's a topic that's at the core of TechLink Health. It sounds like you've done a great job of leveraging technology to help evolve your program and reach out to people that might not naturally be able to find you. Are there any notable cases that you can discuss, say, notable use of technology or ways that you've used technology to create the course? And also, how is technology helping to evolve the medical industry? And what do you see in store for the future of work?
Well, like many people, I did not, at least at the beginning of the pandemic, consider myself a technical person in any way. But of course, I've figured and managed my way around Zoom and other platforms for doing webinars and teaching my course virtually. I mean, we now live in a world where I, myself, a pediatrician in Southern California, can teach physicians who are in the Netherlands and Nepal and Tanzania. I've talked to physicians all over the world and, of course, across the US. So I'm incredibly grateful for this time in history, especially in technology and the evolution of technology, that I do have such access. And as you mentioned, social media, I was not a Twitter person. And it was an advice from a friend who said, you should probably be on Twitter. You're good with the little snips and you can put phrases together. So I've used social media platforms to spread my message, to reach medical students, residents around the world. But ultimately, as I mentioned at the beginning, I do plan to make my course completely on demand and asynchronous for students on a platform that's yet to be determined, but it will happen in the next few months so that they can just access it at any time. So I'm not teaching live. There is still one of me and a million doctors in this country. And I personally want to reach them all. I just am not physically able to do that at this moment. But technology will help me in that message, in that mission. But at the end of the day, I want to keep it the core. And I knew when I began doctoring differently that if you look at my website, my face is there. I didn't necessarily need or want that, but I realized that medicine has become so impersonal for physicians. We don't know how hospitals run. Once you get into the C-suite, once you get into the admins, once you get into insurance, there's no face. We just have no idea. There's no one person. And I realized, listen, at the end of the day, we are people and we want connections with each other. And I hope to be that, at least to be that face that's very transparent about who I am, where I came from, what my journey has been. And technology is helping me, I think, more than anything to be able to have a far reaching message so that I am able to ultimately maintain just that core human interaction with other physicians. So from a physician humanistic standpoint, I think all technology should have the goal of connecting humans and people. But what's in store for the future of medicine within technology and around it and outside of it, it's boundless, quite frankly. We know that almost every industry has virtual and remote medical monitoring devices. We can do telemedicine, telehealth from home, virtually anywhere in the world. There are now ear tips for moms or parents at home to be able to put in their children's ears that have video cameras so a physician can look in and diagnose an ear infection for children. And we know about home, Holter monitors and heart monitoring devices and insulin pumps and things that can be monitored and controlled away from a patient. So this world is just evolving at such a rapid rate in terms of technology. But quite frankly, personally, we know that will happen. I think there's no stopping it. And I think, with the right technology, it can prolong lives, it can mitigate suffering. But for me, I want the core of technology, at least within medicine, to be able to connect humans and to be able to connect physicians with opportunities that work for them.
Yeah, I think that human interaction is so important, and it is something that is becoming more difficult in the practice of medicine, both from the standpoint of the technological issues that get in the way of communication of patient care. And it certainly can be a barrier between the doctor and the patient. But the idea that we can use it as a means of creating greater connectivity and also as a way to practice on your own terms in a practice that meets your needs as well as the needs of your patients is a really exciting thing to consider in these days that we are working in.
Absolutely. And as I started by saying, a lot of what I want to do is just live. I want to live a big life. I want to live a full life and I want to be outside and around the world. And even this summer when I was traveling, I was able to continue some of the work I do. I do some veteran disability work. I could do that remotely. I could do medical expert witness work remotely. So when people saw me and heard, oh, you're a physician, you're traveling. Oh, are you doing telemedicine? That was their only thought. That was their only assumption of what a physician could be doing working remotely abroad. But there are so many opportunities. There's still consulting. There are just so many that we don't even know. Even in the 7 sessions I've done has changed and grown because I've learned so much every time. I'm teaching now things that I didn't know a year ago, but because I'm curious and because I continue to talk to other physicians and explore job boards and postings, I'm able to teach about new platforms like this one. So it's been great journey, and you said it perfectly. There's so many different ways and to connect with patients, but also to connect with each other and with exciting new opportunities to work.
So let's talk a little bit about career burnout, since that is probably an issue that drives a lot of people to find you. Obviously, it's been on the rise within healthcare. We know that most recently, more than 60% of physicians reported having at least one symptom of burnout. And, that's a really frightening and sobering issue for all of us, for physicians and for people who are patients. Nobody wants their doctor to be burned out. So, give us a little bit of your perspective on the topic and how the healthcare industry as a whole might begin to heal as we move forward, past the struggles of the pandemic and the changes that have happened in our world over the last few years.
Well, I may have I don't want to say a radical answer, but from my perspective, and as you know, my journey and my message and what I do, at this point, physicians, our labor generates trillions of dollars. Quite frankly, the healthcare industry and all of the people at the very, very top who make all of the decisions, who've made healthcare nearly untenable for physicians and for healthcare workers. The reasons why children's hospitals are closing in rapid numbers across the country, why healthcare costs more than it does, those are decisions made by a few people at the very, very top. And we earn their money. We as physicians, we are loyal. We're obedient. We do what we're told, and we don't know any other way to work. And quite frankly, that is a great workforce. Additionally, we're not unionized. So we don't have any overarching body that is fighting specifically for us and advocating for us. And so my opinion is there is no end to burnout, quite frankly, until physicians actually say, I refuse to work this way. And I know I have options. We're doing clinical medicine. We were trained and taught only to do clinical medicine. We in training are not taught how to find jobs. We're not even taught how to find clinical positions, much less alternative, unconventional, flexible, lucrative positions that could enhance our quality of life. So we come out thinking that is all we can do. And we don't leave. We're very loyal. We have a lot of pride and we have a lot of ego. Some of those things are really good things that make us great doctors, but very poor advocates for ourselves. And so our empathies, and again, those traits that make us such great doctors have been exploited and taken advantage of. One of the most painful things about being a physician now is the isolation. We're expected to see new patients every 10 or 15 minutes and likely not even chart or do notes at that time. That would have to be in our off time and later on. But we are too busy to take breaks, to take lunch, and certainly too busy to speak to other physicians or to our colleagues. And so that exhaustion, that builds up and that wears us down. And so many physicians feel so isolated and so trapped in what they do. I talk to physicians every day who are just so scared and I don't even know how to describe it. They're so unhappy where they are, so unhappy, but it's almost like a bird in the hand. And they just can't even imagine breaking and trying something even slightly new or different. They went into this field that they thought was going to be one thing, that they were going to have this quality of life, this income, this ability to be present for their families, and they don't have that. People who go to business school or law school, that training you get about negotiating and having to move to climb up your ladder, we don't get that. And our vision in general My observations of physicians is very limited and short-sighted. So quite frankly, I don't think we'll ever see an end of burnout, at least that there'll be any overarching change from the top until physicians actually say, I refuse to work this way. And I know I have options. And once enough physicians, I think both in and outside of medicine, realize that we truly do have options, I think that we can leverage from both sides and take back this career for ourselves, for the other healthcare workers who we work with, who work so hard, and for our patients and for our communities.
Yeah, we all went into medicine for our own reasons, but mostly because we wanted to take care of people. Physicians are good people, and we need to be respected for that and supported. So let's talk about that, about the balance that's necessary to be involved with these other initiatives that are at the core of your work. I think when we're talking about the program that you have, we're not expecting someone to be a full-time physician working 80 hours a week and doing a side gig. There may be people that do that, but most of the time people are looking for a way to get out of that rat race, get off of that treadmill and still be a doctor. So, what are the best practices for balancing those complexities of clinical practice with these passion projects or side gigs? And then to discuss that also in terms of financial health and being able to pay your bills and live a life that's satisfying and rewarding.
Right. So I teach from my personal experience, and I'm very transparent about that. And my experiences, I feel one of the experiences that I think most people could relate to. When I was transitioning and leaving full time clinical medicine, I had almost $200,000 of educational debt. I was renting a small 1-bedroom apartment, driving my med school Corolla, loved her dearly. And I saw no way that given my level of debt, given my income, that I could ever buy a home, have the quality of life I felt I deserved. And in that moment, I talked about getting off of the main highway. In that moment, I said, okay, I can't really think about those long-term goals right now. Right now, I have bills and loans to pay and no one to pay them but me. So I did what I had to do. I went per diem. But going from the ER to an out care, primary care per diem still felt like a big step. I was no longer working those overnight shifts. Evenings, sometimes. Overnights, no. I could decide if I wanted to work on a weekend or holiday. Like I had some control over my life. And as I described in the beginning, I felt just control and I felt the rush coming down. I didn't have someone say, this is your schedule. You're working 3 weekends this month. You're working 2 holidays this winter. I didn't have that. And I do advise physicians who take my course. I do advise if you're in a full-time clinical position, there's absolutely no way at that point that you can truly have a good survey of yourself, your life, what you want. The best way and the next best step is to just have some time. So if you can go 75%, I prefer no physician, at least when they start, that you can have a per diem contract. You can be part-time, but don't be fully committed to more than half time or 0.51 FTE, I'll say. Clinical. Now, clinical is a great way to start. As I said, that's what we know. That's what we're good at. That's what we were designed to do. But we're a glass and we have a limit. And there just simply are not enough hours in the day. And we don't have enough capacity to be a full-time physician, anyone, and then be starting and trying to do side gigs. Right now, the way medicine is set up, we're seeing 30, 40 patients a day. We're taking notes home, doing them around the clock, doing weekend and virtual coverage. So we simply cannot have the time to explore other things. And quite frankly, a number of physicians have signed very exploitative contracts with hospitals that actually prohibit them from exploring outside opportunities, which at least, here in California and here in other states, I've been told that those can't hold up in law, but we don't know. We simply do not know. But back to your point, going per diem, having balance, and being partially clinical while a physician is exploring other things, whether it's taking a break, exploring LinkedIn, taking a class on aesthetics or on functional medicine, signing up for medical expert witness work, or maybe exploring a travel position if they're able to. What I learned is that locums and travel work, I thought, and to all listeners from A states or states that begin with A, this is no offense, but for me, I've never lived in a state that began with A, and they were always very far from me. I grew up in Massachusetts. I went to residency in Massachusetts, residency in New York, and I now live in California. I thought that only the states that began with A had locums, and I didn't want to go that far. But turns out every community, almost every major city even has locums opportunities that can be negotiated for high rates. Anyway, it was all of those things and just starting to explore and be curious and ask questions while paying my bills, while being per diem, while remaining financially solvent, allowed me just that freedom to kind of look up from the earth and say, okay, there are other things. Let me try a little bit of this. Let me try a little bit of that. And again, you've seen how it's evolved. So that's how I look at the balance of it all.
Yeah, that's fantastic. It sounds like you were really able to take back control and you're now teaching other people how to do that for themselves. So, in closing, any final advice for people who would like to stay connected to your work?
Sure. Thank you for asking. I am on social media. I am surprisingly to me anyway, most active on Twitter. So I can be found at doc differently my handle on Twitter. But I'm also on Facebook under Doctoring Differently, on Instagram at doctoring_differently, or please just head to my website, doctoringdifferently.com, and sign up for the mailing list. I have a number of resources there where I try to go somewhat in depth about each of the main alternative career paths that physicians can explore. So there's information on the site. I'm working on getting some free resources up for medical students and for residents. We definitely are seeing a new era in that medical students and residents are reaching out to me early and wanting to know what they can do now. And I advise all of them, if there are any medical students or residents listening, first step of doctoring differently is doctoring. Become a doctor, finish your training. I'm not someone who is going to advise you to quit residency or not anything like that. As far as you want to go, please do that. Take your boards, pass your boards, and then the world is your oyster. It doesn't have to stay fully clinical. It can be whatever you want. We've been poured into these molds, into these cookie cutters of physician careers. But quite frankly, we're also such individuals. And I can't create anyone's perfect career. I can't tell you, okay, do this, this, and this. I can say, hey, what do you like? Let's do this. Let's come down on that. And how about you explore your contacts over here? Have you considered this? And almost every physician I've spoken to has had an idea in the back of their head that they've been suppressing and ignoring for a while, something that they thought they couldn't ever do. Or maybe they had a boss like I did who said, there is nothing else you can do. So given every physician, just giving them just those seeds, those push and that push and a little bit of permission has gone a long way. So please reach out. Would be happy to hear from any of your listeners.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed looking at your website. It feels very welcoming and you address the questions that people have, the very practical questions. What are the first steps? How do I get insurance? How do I say goodbye? How do I make this work? And so looking at the website, I felt like, this is somebody that really understands the questions that doctors have and has some answers that maybe wouldn't have occurred to me or to other people because we haven't done the work in exploring that. A couple more questions. Do you have any book recommendations or other recommendations that have been influential to you or that might more broadly help others achieve a greater level of career satisfaction wherever they are in their process?
There are certainly a number of great books that I've read that have been fantastic. The first one for me, most of them are by women. The first book is called Untamed. It's by Glennon Doyle. It's a book that came out at the beginning, I believe, of 2020. And this is not a medical person. She's not medical. But this is a book where it just really opened my eyes. A lot of parts of the books are geared towards mothers, but particularly towards women and how we've been taught to think, made to think, boxes we've been told to fit in, I think, and a lot of the labor that we do in any profession. And it really helped me put words to the feelings that I had. So that's book number one. The second book I've really enjoyed is a book called It's About Damn Time by a venture capitalist named Arlen Hamilton, who is a Black queer woman who started a venture fund from nothing. She was homeless and had the idea, had the tenacity to heard about venture capital, what it was, and did it. You probably know from me by now, I like people who just do things, who are curious about things and don't listen to what people say and do them anyway. So her book has been incredibly inspiring. And the last book is called Hunting Discomfort. It's by Sterling Hawkins. And this is a book I actually recently finished. And I think actually that might be a book almost every physician should read who is considering a transition. It's called Hunting Discomfort. In the title, you can understand basically the thing you want is on the other side of feeling uncomfortable for a little while. You might feel a little unsure, a little uncomfortable, a little scared, but you should probably do it anyway because anything worth having is probably going to feel a little uncomfortable for a while, but it will be worth it.
Well, thank you so much. Dr. Naomi, it's been a pleasure meeting with you today. And I'd like to just encourage our listeners to check out your website, doctoringdifferently.com. And thank you again.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to this episode. TechLink Health is a healthcare advisory platform for consumers and organizations to stay informed with the latest insights while connecting with healthcare experts for telehealth, e-consults, and consulting services. For more details, visit www.techlink.health.